All right, so I've been waiting for this interview with Kellen Campbell for quite some time, and we were able to pin him down from Mac Discount, Mac Bid. What word am I using here?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. So we initially were started as Mac Discount, but we're in the process of changing to Mac Bid. So we'll be known as Mac Bid going forward, but you can use them interchangeably for the time being. But Discount was because when we initially started the business, and I guess we can get into this, but we had like a retail store out, along with just the auction. And so that had changed, and we can get into the full story. But Mac Bid or Mac Discount, but both work.
Well, wanted to welcome everybody to Boss Juice. And like I said, we got Kellen here, and exciting because this is so different, I think, than a lot of the interviews. I think part of it, too, is the simple fact that I knew you outside of here, but had no idea up until like maybe a year ago that you were even involved with this thing. So with Mac Bid, I'm at the tattoo shop, right? And I'm talking to Corey. Corey's a great guy too, by the way. If you want ink, he's at Three Rivers Tattoo in Millville. Great dude. But anyhow, he started talking about all these different things he's picking up, these odd, unusual things. And he said, at Mac Bid, I'm like, you mean like a Mac Apple, like you're talking about technology? What are you talking? He's like, no, you mean you don't know? And he started enlightening me, right? And then it was a year ago, the Muskie Hunk. So I'm going to plug everybody, I guess. We're so Muskie Max is a fishing expo that we host. But anyhow, I'm on a podcast being interviewed by some guys, and they're talking about Mac again, and they start talking about Kellen Campbell. I'm like, what the hell? What does he have to do with anything? And they're like, well, he's one of the owners. I'm like, you freaking joking me. So anyhow, it's been kind of a year-long thing. Antonino and I start Boss Juice, and I say, man, I think this would be a really great interview. This will be a lot of fun just because of the nature of this thing. So one of the questions that I have for you from the start is getting into this business. Tell me a little bit about what drove you to go this direction. And then I've got questions because I know a little bit about your past, your history, and being competitive and things like that. I'm going to ask you a question there, but tell me how and why.
So I got exposed to this kind of industry, broadly speaking, almost by accident. So I was working as a sales guy for a logistics company, almost straight out of, I went undergrad to Pitt, and then I got my MBA at Pitt not soon after that. And I was working as a sales guy for a logistics company locally here in Pittsburgh. And I had a family friend who had reached out to my dad and said he was looking for salespeople. I really enjoyed what I was doing at the time. I had no interest in doing any of that. And I've known this guy for such a long time, and he was a little bit, he's an interesting guy. And I was like, I don't know if I'd ever want to work for him. But but he was asking like, hey, do I know anybody? Because he was looking for a sales rep. And I said, let me think about it. I said, off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody, but let me get back to you. So the next day he reaches out and he's like, well, what about you? And I said, I told him what I was making at the time, and I was doing pretty well for the age I was, and I was very comfortable with what I was making. And he told me what it was, and I said, yeah, it's probably not going to work. Just, it wouldn't be worth switching. So he said, okay. And I said, but if I think of anybody, I'll absolutely let you know. So then like a couple of days pass, he calls me back again and says, well, what if we raise the offer to this and do this? And I said, it's still probably not going to be enough, and I really enjoy what I'm doing, but thanks. And so he said, well, just come in and do an informal interview. Like, come meet the team, come see what we're all about. And I thought, okay, I mean, what's the harm in that? Mm-hmm. So I went down there, and it was, the company was called Genco. They were in Blawnox, right next to the Fox Chapel Yacht Club. And it was this old warehouse that they had kind of turned into. It was still partially warehouse, and then they turned some of it into office space. So there were like no windows or doors. The carpeting was this like green, ugly green color that hadn't been changed in years. And I thought, why did he bring me down here? There's no chance like this is going to win me over. So I told him, hey, I appreciate it, but this is just not for me. So I did the informal interview and met everybody on the team, and it all seemed like very nice people and people that I could work with, obviously. But I was just like, nah, that's still okay. So he finally comes back. This is like the third or fourth time now, and says, look, here's what we'll do. We're going to pay you this. We'll get you this. We'll get you this. And I finally said, okay, great, let's do it. So I had no idea what I was getting into. And what it was Genco had kind of revolutionized what they refer to as reverse logistics. And so reverse logistics is just a sexy term for returns liquidation. Now there's more to it than that, right? Because, they call forward logistics the product, how the product gets distributed to the customer. So whether that be through a brick and mortar retailer or through, an online .com, there's the forward side of it. The reverse side is, okay, you've decided that for whatever reason, you don't want that product. How do we get that product back in the most efficient way and then essentially, monetize it, however that, whatever the case may be. And so at that point, Genco had built a software package and had really revolutionized the reverse logistics space because they started centralizing returns processing. So before it was all handled kind of at the store level, and this was way back when the .com side of things was really starting to take off. And so there was still a different element to this that Genco had really kind of figured out.
Roughly?
This is the mid to late 2000s.
Okay.
So, and so they had Genco at that point had just acquired all of Amazon's liquidation.
Wow.
And so, you think about that now and you're like, well, that's huge. And it's like, well, it wasn't as big then, obviously, as it is now, but it was still significant. And so Genco had this, this customer base that was used to a brick and mortar type of return. So it's a little bit different mix. A Sears or a Kmart or, Walmart, that type of return is a little bit different than what Amazon was getting because the Sears or Kmart will restock a lot of that stuff because you can actually physically inspect the product in a brick and mortar store, even if it's a return, right? Whereas Amazon was always hesitant to send a lot of that product back out because you can't see it before you buy it. You buy it and then it shows up at your door, right? And so if it shows up and the box is damaged or whatever, then, usually people refuse a shipment or send it back or whatever. So, and so those returns were actually a little bit cleaner, right? And so the price point was higher and all that stuff. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too far into the weeds, but anyway, when they had first acquired the account, it was like a dog account, wasn't doing very well. They hired me and another guy that I'm still very close with even today. And we had completely turned the account around to, one of the more profitable accounts that Genco had. And from there, they had promoted me up to, I was what they deemed the director of procurement. So it was my responsibility to go out and find opportunities, find deals, talk to the retailers, that type of thing. And so it was a business development role essentially. And I did really well with it. Ultimately, what ended up happening was Genco was bought by FedEx, and Genco had a bunch of other branches business units that FedEx really seemed interested in. The liquidation piece wasn't the most attractive to FedEx. And so they were kind of just letting it go. They weren't growing the business. They were just kind of letting it sustain itself. The problem was I was a business development guy. And so without us growing the business, like what was I doing? And so ultimately what ended up happening was I talked to them and I went to work for one of my customers for a couple of years in Cincinnati, and worked down there for a couple of years, grew the business for them. It did really well. I wanted to get back. I was going to Cincinnati every week and then traveling from there. I was on the road almost every day.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a ton. It was a ton. So I'd leave on on a Monday morning or a Sunday night and then come back on like a Friday night, Saturday morning type of thing. And then from Cincinnati, I was jumping off into Nashville and Indianapolis and Georgia and all these other places. So I spent a ton of time on the road, learned a ton. I worked with two guys that had founded the business. They were very entrepreneurial, not super sophisticated. So it was kind of, I'd went from a corporate environment where, everything was kind of buttoned up to this like entrepreneurial environment where it was kind of, shoot from the hip and figure it out type of thing. And I thought, oh man, this is really cool. And I thought, I watched what those guys had done and thought, man, I could probably do this. So the long and short of it was, I worked for them for 2 years. I wanted to get back. I was married at the time, but we didn't have any kids. I wanted to start a family and knew that lifestyle just wasn't going to work. And so I had worked with my current business partner, Sean, at Genco, and he was still kind of there, hanging around, but he was also looking to start this. So we had discussed starting this business, way back when we had worked together at Genco. and kicked it around for a while. And, I had sold this product literally all over the world. I mean, I'd sold it into the Philippines, all over the U.S., and there was no one really in Western PA doing anything like this. And I thought, man, what a great opportunity. This would be perfect. Like, this type of market is perfect for, this part of the country. And so me and Sean started talking around 2017 about, putting a business plan together and like what this would look like, and, what we think, where we would start, and, having those conversations. And so the first thing was to find a location. And we found a location down in Washington, PA. It was kind of like a friend of my uncle type of thing. And I met Sean. Me and Sean both went down there, and it was this really old industrial building. The floors weren't level. The docks were in bad shape. The roof leaked. There were like probably about 25 raccoons living in the building.
Perfect, right?
Yeah, it was ideal because we were a true startup. Like, we were self-funded, and we had both put money in and said, okay, we're gonna take a stab at this. So we found this place that was really ugly. We did our own demo work. I almost took Sean's eye out the first day we were doing the demo. We were taking down a suspended ceiling that had pretty much all collapsed, and I hit him with like one of the connection pieces of aluminum right in the eye. And I was like, oh, this is a great way to start the business. But anyway, we got all the work done, and I think we brought our first load in. I still have the video of us unloading the truck. I'm on the forklift. I have no idea what I'm doing. We have the dock ramp in backwards. It's a mess. But we got it done and unloaded into the warehouse. And then it was just like hustle to sell however you could sell. And so like we started using Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and all these different ways to sell this product just to get it off the ground. And then obviously we launched our first auction, which was interesting because all of our registered bidders were like family and friends. Like, if you look even today on our bidder list, you look through like bidders 1 through 40, it's all like friends and family that were, we're just out there like, just please bid on our stuff. So, so we can make some money. And then at that point, we were always afraid to put too much high value product in the auction because we're an absolute auction. We started $1 with no reserve price. So we were always paranoid, like, well, what happens if we start selling this stuff at a loss? We'll go out of business quick. So we would pull some of the higher value stuff off. And then again, it was like, I was hustling on like Facebook Marketplace and like meeting people. Like, I was delivering stuff. Like, I remember the one day I drove from Washington all the way up to Butler to deliver a pull-up bar to a guy, and like I look back at it now, I'm like, I think I sold the pull-up bar for like $50. Like, what was I doing? There's no way that was a smart decision, but that was our customer base. That's how we started, And so what would happen is, as we grew and we started selling more and more stuff, we opened up like a store within the warehouse where people would come in essentially on the weekends. So we'd scan, me and Sean would scan during the week, and then on the weekends we would post auctions and post the auctions online, and I'd run the store. So, and then we briefly had an online website where we were selling this stuff through too. So, and so that's what it was. And we were just hustling to try and make money. And so that took us up to, we ran our first auction in 2018, and we were growing. We had done some things. We'd made a lot of mistakes. We initially thought that we could grow the auction pickups by centralizing essentially processing and then distributing out to smaller locations. So in like 2018, 2019, we had a small little location in Allentown by Mount Washington in Pittsburgh. It was like an old motorcycle chop shop type of thing. That was like its garage. It was like maybe 1,000 square feet, maybe. We had one in Blair, Ohio, just south of Wheeling, and we had one in Butler. And so we were doing all the processing in Washington, and we would process, and then we would staff for like, I think it was like Thursday, Friday, we would do pickups. So we'd run the auctions, and then we would do pickups. We would distribute out to those locations, and then we'd do pickups. And it just didn't work. Like, it was too much processing, too much handling, too much, And so so we shut those down, and then decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to focus on growing the auctions in Washington and trying to get the store up. Well, right about that time, we ran into COVID, right? And so we were shut down for almost a week. And like, it was one of these things, like, we're like, what are we going to do? And so we came up with the plan of, what we're going to do is we're going to become completely online. And so we got rid of the store, went to auction. We only did auction pickup, no transactions on site. no customers in the building. We were doing curbside removal, curbside pickup at the time. And so we sent in that plan, we sent in that appeal to both the governor and then our local representatives. We never heard back from the governor's office, but our local representative in Washington got back to us immediately and said, look, if this is your plan, you guys are considered an online business, you don't need to shut down. And so that was like, it was one of those things like you look back on and you're like, at the time, like we were sweating it because I was like trying to still sell stuff online and then like go and I was meet people in Washington and I'd have the doors closed because I was paranoid that, you know, someone would come in and be like, well, you guys aren't supposed to be open. And, you know, so it was just one of those things like you were trying to do whatever because, I mean, we weren't making any money at that point. Like, you know,
nobody knew those waters either. This
that's
was
right.
all new.
Yeah. That's right.
To planet Earth, really. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm interested too, and because Anthony knows a technology guy, I'd mentioned that. So in that short window, how did you start to, from a technology standpoint, use technology to drive this? Because now all of a sudden there's opportunities, but there's also disadvantages.
Sure.
So explain a little bit of that.
So we had Andrew, who is our full-time IT guy. He's been with us since inception. He started as a part-time guy. And we knew exactly how we wanted to build the system, right? So we couldn't use an off-the-shelf solution for what we were doing because, you know, one of the difficulties with what we do and an off-the-shelf solution is every one of the items that comes into our warehouse is unique, even if it's the same exact item, right? So you get, you know, an air fryer, and you have the same exact air fryer, and they're the same model, but the items are unique because they've both been opened. One maybe have been used, maybe one hasn't been used, maybe neither one of them has been used, but this one has a scratch on it, this one's dented, or this one's brand new, and this one has, you know, some pieces missing. So, you know, we knew that was a challenge for us, and then how we reorder also created challenges, right? Because we don't necessarily know what's coming until we actually receive the product. You know, so there's a lot of challenges in what we do versus a traditional retailer. Whereas like, hey, you sell, you know, products A through Z, and when Z gets low, you reorder Z. Like that's not how we operate at all. We buy truckloads, and this product is completely random as to what we're getting off of those truckloads. And like I said, add to that fact that each thing is unique as well. It creates a significant inventory challenge with an off-the-shelf type of software solution. So we built it internally, knowing exactly what we were getting into because of our experience in the past. Of here's the challenges that other people have run into. Here's how we're going to avoid those challenges. And it obviously it's been very, very successful. Now we've made changes to it as we've gone, but we have some really talented. Andrew in particular is a very talented individual when it comes to the IT side of things, and we're able to. I don't know anything about coding, but I can tell him what I want, and he can go, okay, this is how we can get it done.
Right.
Cool. So it works.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, kind of going back a bit, one of the things I think is really interesting is in your past life, you had a good job. You worked for a fairly large company. It sounds like more in like the corporate world. Mm-hmm. How was that transition to like the entrepreneurial side of things? You mentioned a couple of times about you were hustling, and there's some hard times there. But how was that? Like, did you ever have a feeling like, hey, I made a mistake. This was maybe I shouldn't have done this. What was that transition like? Not
after I made the decision to do it. Up to that point, yeah, because you just don't know how it's going to turn out. And I know that the hesitancy to launch, right, to take a shot at something. You're waiting for the right time. I mean, we've all dealt with that. And that's not unique to me either. I mean, it was one of those things like we thought long and hard about, like, is this the right thing to do? And I can tell you, like, because that stuff happens even now, like we start thinking about like, okay, do we open a new location, or, all the decisions that we make on a regular basis, like, you have to think through them, and there's unknowns, and mm-hmm. unknowns is risk, right? Because the stuff that you don't know can go any direction, good or bad. And so the one thing that when I decided ultimately that I was going to do this, I have a pretty analytical, math-based mind. And so I thought, okay, here's the situation. If we don't get this thing in 5 years to where it can sustain and I can make a decent living off of it, then I'll get out. And I thought at that point, like, okay, what am I actually risking at that? If I put 5 years into this, what am I actually risking? And the reality of it is, the risk is you got to work for 5 more years. And I like working. So the reality of it is, like, that wasn't a huge risk to me. So I wasn't probably ever going to be the guy that tried to retire at 50 or 55 or even 60 or 65 for that matter. Like, I thought that I really, really enjoy working. I don't know what it is about it. I will, if it wasn't for my family and my kids, I would work a ton all the time.
Well,
and
about that wiring that you bring, I'm glad you brought up that transition between corporate and having that entrepreneurial spirit and running with things. But I've had the good fortune I've known your family through a mutual friend for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Okay. Great family. You got great brothers. I know your dad. So I know a little bit about the background, and I think we have a mutual friend who introduced us, Joe Miller.
Yeah.
Joe's a great guy. In fact, I'm meeting up with him in about a week.
Yeah.
So can't wait to see him. And he always says, hey, tell him I said hello.
Yeah.
Joe was your wrestling coach too.
That's right.
So you guys were wrestlers at West Allegheny. I know you and your brothers were all involved with sports, football, things like that. Super successful. But I wonder how much of that early coaching and the way that you were raised, that particular wiring built in the competitive nature that you have too. And I think that little bit of fearlessness that we all have. Same thing with me. I played sports in school. We were successful. We weren't successful at the early onset, but as our team pulled together, we got better. And then you gain confidence and things like that. Tell me a little bit about that early wiring and what gave you the fortitude to kind of pull forward. I mean, you have an education. You guys are all smart. You're all successful in your own rights. But what is driving you? How did all that start?
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot because I've been incredibly fortunate with. I just have an unbelievable family, and even growing up, I had an unbelievable support system around me. Like you said, Joe Miller was my youth wrestling coach, and then as I went into high school, he became the high school wrestling coach as well. And then there's other guys too. Like I played football at West Allegheny when we were really, really good. Coach Pelko had just gotten there when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and West Allegheny had been kind of just a program, just a run of the mill average football program. And when he got there, like, things changed. My freshman year, I got to play varsity as a freshman, and we won the Whippeal title. And then we won 3 more in 4 years. And I played in the state championship game 2 years, my junior and senior year. So just incredibly fortunate that I got to have that experience. And, that's one of those things, like, success begets success. You know what I mean? Like, you learn to figure out what made you successful. And, there's an element of, understanding that, some of it is a little bit of luck, being in the right place at the right time. The way I explain that to people is I went on to play at football at Pitt. I walked on. Like, I was very much a tweener. I'm a little bit short and not fast enough for the size that I am, and not big enough for the speed that I am. And so I decided I was going to walk on, and I had an opportunity to walk on. It was great. A lot of that opportunity had to do with the fact that I was at West Allegheny and I got a lot of exposure. And so when I got the opportunity to go to Pitt, there were 2 guys that I played fullback there. I went there initially as a safety. I was like 190 pounds, and I jumped all around. So I went from safety to linebacker and ultimately to fullback before I actually got an opportunity, because I was just looking for an opportunity, right? I just needed an opportunity to show that I could actually play. And when I got to the fullback room, there was a kid there, Lou Polite, who's just a fantastic individual. He still works at the university. I'm sure a lot of people are really familiar with him. He was a captain for 3 years and played in the NFL for a long time. But he was a couple years ahead of me. And then there was kind of an open area, and then there was a kid named Henry Hynoski who came in after me. And so the way I explain it to people is I was incredibly fortunate that the timing just worked out where I had ended up being before Hynoski and after Lou. But I also worked my ass off to get the opportunity to get on the field. And I probably beat out kids that were definitely more athletic than me and better, pure athletes through whatever reason. I mean, grit or just intelligence, because I was the type of guy that wasn't going to make a mistake and, was going to be where I had to be and when I was supposed to be there and all that good stuff. So, but had I been a little older or a little younger, I probably don't play because I wouldn't have beaten those guys out. And so like, there's a combination of just like working really hard and then the opportunity presents itself and being a little bit lucky. And, I guess that's the right way to explain it. I know luck is probably a bad explanation. It probably doesn't explain all of it. But there's definitely the taking advantage of the opportunity. And it is one of those things, like if you work really hard, like you start to figure things out and things happen
absolutely.
for you.
The luck, I think, coupled with timing,
Sure,
is a lot of it's who you mentioned about having a great support system around you, and I think that from the time you were a kid up until the college years when you start getting into that. But man, when you start tasting winning, there's nothing like it.
yeah,
You don't want to go backwards, and I think that's how it translates into business for all of us probably sitting here. Antonino is a Pitt grad as well. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't. No,
2019.
a lot younger than me. Yeah, but that's awesome.
Yeah, but that's cool. I think that's a good point. Like, I think that competitive nature in sport really helps with the hard work and the grind. I think that teaches entrepreneurs the discipline of like a lot of times it's like you're on your own. You have to make the decision to wake up in the morning and go to work, even if you're working for yourself. So I think sports really teaches people how to be consistent. But one of the other things I wanted to ask too was you had mentioned earlier on in your story about Genco, and they had revolutionized this reverse logistics, as you put it, industry. So that's your background. And with MacBid, how did you like revolutionize a new system here, or are you just kind of going off of that reverse logistics?
No.
platform?
So two things that we knew when we started this business that a lot of it. So Genco did a lot of wholesale, right? So the best way to think about that is they were buying truckloads of this product, and then they were selling truckloads of this product. Now, there are advantages to that because they can get to scale relatively quickly, right? You're truckload in, truckload out, and they had warehousing and they had cash, and so they could build trust with these retailers relatively quickly, right? Because you go in and talk to these big retailers. There's a lot of guys that can sell direct to the consumer, but what they couldn't get to was scale. So they couldn't get to the size necessary enough to take on an account like an Amazon or a Walmart or something like that. And so what our idea is we needed to get to scale and sell directly to the consumer, because that would allow us to then work directly with the retailers and get the higher recovery. So it would be win-win on both sides of the coin.
Gotcha.
Because what the retailers are essentially giving up by working with some of the wholesalers is they're just giving up what we refer to as recovery. It's just dollars, right? There's a middleman there. Now, those middlemen play an important role, particularly for the retailer, because they need someone to move these volumes, right? So they take these volumes in and then they'll wholesale them out by the truck, right? So there's definitely value there. And what we recognize is if we could get to scale, if we could take this thing to a scale that we could, reach critical mass, so to speak, then we could swallow enough volume that we would become attractive to these retailers, and ultimately we could do a better job of selling it, so we could compete on the price standpoint too.
Right. And what made you confident in when you made that jump? You and your partner Sean, what made you guys confident that hey, this is something worthwhile doing? Was it simply the scale? Like, were you concerned about getting to scale? Like, what was it that made you confident? Like, hey, this is worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, people ask me this question all the time, and I think it's in the similar vein. Like, did you think that this would get to what it would get to? And I don't know the answer to that. Like, if you would ask me when I started this business what I thought this would be, like, did I think that it could get to this level? Yeah, sure. Did I think it would happen as fast as it did? Probably not. If I would tell you that, I'd probably be lying to you. But we weren't necessarily like we had a goal, right? So the way to think about this is we'd set a goal and say, this is what we want to get to, right? And then you frame everything you do around that goal. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to hit that goal, but it's progress towards that goal that what sets you up. And so once you have that goal, you just work backwards to say like, well, what the hell do we need to do today to move us just incrementally towards that goal? And that goal will change, right? You'll start to realize, oh, we made a mistake here. We shouldn't have done this, or this is how we can figure this out. And that's been, we've made a ton of mistakes. We've gotten a ton of things wrong. And so, that's where like just setting the goal, working backwards toward that goal, and being able to adjust when you realize that you made a mistake or that you screwed up and you miscalculated. We knew that we had to get to scale. Did I believe that we could get there? Yeah, obviously I believed it on some level. Was I certain that was going to happen? No, I don't think anybody could be certain that, there's so many unpredictable things. It's hard to be like certain, but right. You just kind of figure it out and you work hard, and if you're smart and you keep your eyes open, that, it'll work out.
And I think when you talked about just now, adjusting. Even when we were downstairs, you were giving us a tour before this. You had mentioned multiple times how, I learned this first lesson here and I made this change. I think that's part of entrepreneurship, is being able to adjust and change paths. So that kind of brings me to my next question. What like, obviously I think every entrepreneur has horror stories, but what was your hardest learning lesson? Like, what was that you were like, oh crap, had I gone back, I would have never done this again?
I don't know if I have any regrets in that regard, but we certainly have made many, many mistakes. One of them being initially, like I said, we thought that because this product was so unique, we thought that centralized processing would be the right way to do it, right? You would process in one location, you'd develop an expertise around, your scanners would develop expertise around product lines, and then you could distribute out, and that's the right way to do it. We soon found that the cost of doing that just didn't justify the operation. So that was like, we opened up 3 locations that were just bleeding money because, we were processing in one location and then putting it into boxes, putting it into a truck, distributing it out to another location, unpacking it onto shelves, then, and then having customers pick up. It just didn't make any sense to do it that way. And we thought that was the right way to do it initially. Mm-hmm. We were dead wrong. We were dead wrong. And so what we had to do was change directions and say, okay, what we can do is allow our system to be more supportive of the scanning process, so that obviously having experienced scanners matters, but it would matter less if you could have a system that, would help them with that process. And so that's kind of what we did. We made the system more robust to be able to handle that. And obviously it's been working.
On that little tour. And the other thing is too, we talked about this the other day. I've become a MacBid addict right, recently. And honestly, I wanted to learn the process too. And then you were gracious enough to take us on a tour. You took me on a tour a month or 2 ago, but also I wanted to find out on my own a little bit about the way these processes are set up. And in addition to that, like learning that and what you showed us downstairs, you've pointed out a couple times now about making a lot of mistakes. Mm-hmm. The thing is, it's building your knowledge base the whole time. Yeah. And I think the other thing, coupled with what we talked about earlier about your wiring and that competitive nature, between, those, when you start adding those qualities together, you're not going to fail. And you're going to fail and you're going to learn from it. Yeah. Every time. And, when I look at like how many locations you have now between Butler and Akron, I guess, what, about 9 locations locally?
There are 7 in Pennsylvania and 5 in Ohio, okay, depending on what you deem local.
And then you have some Southern.
Right. And then there's another
as well.
5 in the Carolinas. So what's that, 17? And then we have 2 more opening here shortly. So I think that takes us to 19 or 20, I think.
What do you, without getting too far ahead here, what are the next big things for MacBid?
Yeah, so I think the next thing is we'll start to move further west with locations. I think there's going to be, obviously we have one in Texas that'll hopefully be open end of this month, beginning of next month. We should be running auctions. so that's kind of the next thing is we'll continue to move further west. There's certainly product that we don't have access to just because of limitations in shipping and costs associated with that, that can open up new markets for us that we don't currently have access to. So we'll probably continue to see more expansion west. There's some other, smaller projects that we just are continual improvements in how we sell and what we do. And, I know one of the newer things that we've added probably within the last month or so is what we call last chance deals. So what that is stuff that doesn't sell through the auction, so it doesn't get a bid. What we did was we said, hey, there's still value in it. And so what we decided to do was when the auctions are all closed at about 9 o'clock at night, we take all the stuff that didn't sell, we make it a fixed price of $299, and then it's one click buy. And so, and then you have that opportunity to buy that until 9 o'clock the next morning. And so what that's done is just cut down on the unsolds, cut down on, us, what we have to rescan or reprocess or take off the shelf. All that stuff has been cut down significantly with that addition. The other thing is we've opened bin stores too. So we have a bin store in Uniontown, a bin store in Canton, Ohio.
Describe that real quick.
Yeah, sure. And then we're going to have one here in Butler, hopefully, same time frame, probably about the end of the month, beginning of next month. And so what that is the best way to think about that is it's a dollar store where the price changes every day and the inventory completely turns over every week. And so what we have is these bins they're approximately 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and probably about 18 inches deep. And what we do is we take all this product, this smaller stuff, and we dump it into these bins. And our model, the way it works is we're open 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, same as the auction hours. And then on Monday, everything is $5. On Tuesday, everything is $4. Wednesday, everything's $3. Thursday, everything's $2. And then on Friday, everything's 50 cents. And so by the end of the week, everything is sold out, and then we refill the bins the following week. And so what that has allowed us to do is some of this lower value stuff, so items that are, say, $30 and under, and some of the more expensive stuff does sneak in there, so it's kind of cool that people get some killer deals every once in a while.
Right.
But what that allows us to do is, keep this product kind of moving, right? And so that's kind of another thing. You'll probably see a couple more bin stores coming as well.
You took us on a tour, right, and walked us through that process like this well-oiled machine from the time product is arriving on these 53-foot trailers, 58-foot trailers, to the time that it's palleted and broken down, scanned. I mean, there's a process that is really super unique, the way this whole thing needs to happen. But one of the more, I think, equally important things that I've seen is you're not doing brand new build outs of the facilities. You're retrofitting pre-existing structures. So you've got to get really creative. You and this team, you've got to get really creative on the flow of receiving and clear through the whole process of the product going out the door. How often does the turnover need to happen?
So with the product, we can turn it really fast, right? So depending on how much we want to keep on hand at any particular facility, and we have a target, but it does fluctuate based on the building size and what we want to sell out of that particular building. But everything we have figured, I don't want to say figured out, makes it sound like we're not constantly learning, because we are, but we have a really good process for, we know exactly how wide the aisles have to be. We know exactly how much racking we need. We know how much product fits into the racking. We know how big our truck bays have to be. We know how much product we can remove in a single hour, and what kind of staffing levels we need, and all that stuff has been kind of dialed in, and we're constantly reviewing it to say, like, okay, this is what it looks like. But yeah, in regards to retrofitting the building, we essentially take that model and all that knowledge that we know based on how big the building is, where are the once we figure out what the removal locations are going to look like, what does the inbound truck traffic look like, how wide, how many aisles can we fit in based on the sections, how much can we sell, and can we keep enough inventory on hand in our storage bays to justify the amount of racking we want to put up, or put away space, I should say. So yeah, they are retrofitted, and you know, our locations are a little bit unique in the sense that about half of our locations are traditional retail locations. So if you go to our Pittsburgh Mills location, it's an old Sears. If you go to our Washington location, it's an old Macy's. If you come to this Robinson location, it's a traditional, you know, industrial warehouse type of setting. So we're able to kind of mold this model into different spaces because of the uniqueness of what we do, right? Because even the business itself does kind of, you know, we are retail, but we're also warehousing. And, you know, so even the business is a little bit unique in that regard, right? We drive a ton of foot traffic, you know, but we also drive a ton of truck traffic because of the nature of what we do. So we fit different elements of those two kind of things, and we're unique in the sense that we're not a traditional retailer, but we're also not a traditional .com. You know, it's just we have kind of a unique model.
Well, I think too for your Mac bid audience, right? We had the privilege of seeing like this process, and most don't. They'll order, and it's pretty seamless. They come pick up their product and go, right? But then you had mentioned too, like with that baler being down, and the amount of cardboard and pallets and things like that people don't even think they have a concept of how much volume, just one location, how much goes through here and how much needs repurposed, taken out of here, recycled.
Yeah, it's a serious operation. I mean, it's not just you know, I don't think people realize how serious an operation is. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, we you know, I don't know what we produce out of this location in terms of cardboard, but I'm going to guess that this one does probably about 2 tons of cardboard every day, baled, which is kind of crazy, right?
Ancillary businesses too.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you're driving other economy without even trying to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the other thing is too, when you said you and Sean pretty much were the brain kids and pulled this all together. And so there were a couple of you. Where are you at now? You know, staffing wise, things like that. It's got to be monstrous, really.
Yeah. So we, last I checked, we're probably around, you know, 1,300 employees, somewhere in that range. It might be a little more than that. I'd have to check. I mean, obviously, as we get these new locations up, that will absolutely grow and probably push us into the 1,500 range.
That's
easily.
The power of entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, you're creating jobs for people and taxes and tax revenue.
Oh, yeah.
There's just so much involved. And this was basically just an idea. That's the thing about this whole, you come up with an idea, you have experience, you have knowledge, but then you have the wiring to be able to pull all this together. And all the other things that I think so many people may not even realize stem from what you've done. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. I mean, even to think, so, I mean, the other thing that's probably worth mentioning is like, we like to think of ourselves as like a second chance business, right? So obviously that's pretty straightforward with the product, right? We're taking returns and other liquidation and giving it a second life, right? To someone that can get a good deal and, you know, will buy that product. But the other side of it is like what we talked about before was with the real estate, right? So we've moved into these, mall locations that have been empty for years and like are starved for tenants, and given new life to a lot of these spaces. I mean, Pittsburgh Mills is a great example. That Sears building outside of a Spirit Halloween that would move in every season was mostly empty for the last, I don't know when Sears had moved out 6-8 years ago, maybe, I don't even know. But the Macy's is the same way in Washington, empty space that, you know, they were just looking for a tenant. And so, you know, we were able to kind of revitalize some of these spaces. And then the third element of that is, and this is kind of something that we stumbled into early on. So when we first started hiring our employees in Washington, like, I mean, early on when we first started, it was essentially just me and Sean working in the warehouse. We interviewed a couple folks that happened to be connected with like the city mission in Washington. And so they were recovering addicts. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our early employees were guys that were recovering addicts and needed someone to take a chance on them. And so I can tell you that, like, you know, look, everyone doesn't work out, right? We've certainly had experiences with guys that just, you know, they weren't ready. They can't get their stuff together. But we have overwhelmingly had a tremendous amount of success with individuals that all of a sudden, like, they just get their stuff together and like they're different people. It's you know, I tell a lot of our guys, our district manager for Pittsburgh is one of these guys that, like, he came to us as an hourly employee working in Washington. He was maybe employee number 10. And, you know, he's a sharp kid, like, was smart, didn't really have it together yet. He, you know, he was struggling to get to work on time, and like he was going through the whole recovery thing. And so he worked for us for, I don't know, 6-8 months, and he just couldn't get to work. And so I told him, I'm like, look, man, you need to get to work or I'm going to fire you. And so he told me, he's like, my heart's not really in this. And like, I'm going to go do something else. And like, I liked him. And I said, yeah, fine. That's, you know, go for it. So he worked, that was about the spring. He worked the summer. And then at the end of the summer, he came back and said, hey, look, can I come back? And, I said, yeah. I said, but here's the thing. I said, you're a good worker, but look, we had the issues with like you getting to work on time, and you need to get to work on time. He's like, won't be a problem. So he came back, started as an hourly guy, and he's worked his way up. Like, I don't know what, I tell him this all the time. I don't know what decision he made, but he just made a decision that he was going to be a different person. And he's just totally different. And he's our district manager now.
Wow.
So, I mean, he's got an unbelievable story, and I tell him it's an inspiring story, because like it shows you that, and because he's certainly made some really, really bad decisions in his life. And he'd probably be the first to tell you that that's the case. But he just decided that he wasn't going to make bad decisions anymore, you know, and he was going to start making good decisions. And that stuff compounds, right? I mean, I tell people all the time, like, making good decisions and making bad decisions, they compound. So if you make bad decisions, guess what? It's not going to be, you'll fall quick, you know? And if you make good decisions, like, you don't know what the limits of that will be.
Well, circling back to what we talked about earlier about with people who were instrumental, like Joe Miller, right? I think, and this is just me spitting out here, you're able to kind of mentor and help people in that regard because you had that.
For sure.
And that's a really great quality. Not everybody's there.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, it's, again, I've been incredibly fortunate in a lot of ways to have that, you know, to just have those types of folks that, I mean, you know, for the most part, I mean, it's people that believe in you too, you know. I'm extremely close with both my mother and father and both of my brothers. You know, I talk to them regularly, probably daily, actually. Right. And so, you know, I don't know what, you know, there's some element of like, you know, just that's luck. You know, I didn't, you know, I certainly didn't have anything to do with who my parents were, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Right. That's for sure.
Is any family involved in the business at all?
So I have my 2 sister-in-laws work, one in marketing and one in safety. And I think that's it. I have it would be a cousin. It's technically my mom's cousin, my mom's first cousin. Mm-hmm. He works in Warren. He's one of the GMs.
Nice. Cool. And you have a location in Warren,
Ohio.
Warren, Ohio. Okay,
yeah.
Okay. So how do you, I'm actually curious, you bring up these different locations. Is there a method to the madness on selecting a location? Like, what's the process for picking a location?
Certainly. So the way we operate is it's to think about it is districts essentially. So the way we have it now is we have what we refer to as the tri-state, which is Washington, Uniontown, Bridgeport, Ohio. Then we have Ohio, which is Akron, Canton, Boardman, Warren, and then Pittsburgh, which I always forget the Pittsburgh locations, but it's essentially Robinson, Butler, Mills, Monroeville, and
Beaver Falls.
No, Beaver Falls is actually an Ohio district.
Oh.
I always forget this one. What is it?
Oh, it's McKees Rocks?
Monroeville? No, it's not McKees Rocks. Yeah, that's it.
I was reading up on the board over there.
We have a cheat sheet.
Yeah, so you do have a cheat sheet up there, yeah. But and then obviously the Carolinas are a different district. But cool. the way we operate, and the idea behind what we do is to, one, find a demographic that we think will work for us, right? So what does the customer base look like within that demographic? But two, what's the product availability within that market?
Okay.
So like to think about this, obviously we started in Pennsylvania because that's where we were from, and that was probably less of something we looked at. Although when we opened in Washington, we did have some insight as to what the demographic there and what the shopping patterns were based on like the outlet mall being there and us having a connection to some folks that have told us like it's a great market for that type of product. So that's the reason we chose Washington initially. Because we were told that some of the outlets that were there with those retailers, those outlets within those retailers were some of the best outlets that they had countrywide.
Wow.
So, that's why we chose Washington initially, and then we kind of grew out from there. But and then the next way to think about this is like South Carolina. There's good access to product there between the Charlotte and Atlanta markets, and the demographic because we're in Anderson, Greenville, Spartanburg, Rock Hill, and Gastonia. So it's that area essentially on the top. I forget what they call it, the upstate of South Carolina essentially. And then obviously as we go kind of east and north, you get into the Charlotte area.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But access to product, good market demographics, and then the idea is to get one of these locations up, and that's the one where that's going to be kind of I don't want to call it an anchor, but that's going to be what everything kind of goes off of. So once you have a customer base built out for an initial location, so we have a whole marketing plan about how we attack a new market and get a new facility up and running. But once that market is established, then what we're doing is looking for locations that are far enough that justify a drive, but close enough that we can transfer between the two locations.
Gotcha.
So it opens us up to additional population because we don't ship, right? Everything's customer pickup. So it opens up to additional population, but close enough that you can transfer, transportation costs internally, that you can transfer. And then what happens is, as you build that customer base in the first location, it will essentially set a floor on the second location, right? So if you have product in location 2 that is going up for auction, but the customer base in that location isn't built up yet, the customer base from location 1 will just transfer it. And so they'll set the floor for that product. They won't let anything go too cheap. And so that's kind of how we build out these districts and these markets.
That's pretty cool. And I think that's super interesting too, because you'd mentioned you don't really ship. People come and pick it up. Yeah. And I think that's going to be the future, in my opinion. I mean, look at Amazon. They're opening up stores where you can pick up your stuff
that
too.
last mile is a challenge. We've had third parties come to us and say like they'll deliver the last mile. And for a while there, it was semi-working. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, like the last mile is a challenge. You know what I mean? Everybody struggles with that. Even Amazon, that's why they have their own fleet now, because the last mile is the most difficult aspect of it. So we think if we can get to, a certain density of population, that, they'll come within a short distance to pick up, especially if there's a deal to be had.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what works in your favor is I think people are more willing to drive because of the deal aspect of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt.
Is one curious question out of curiosity, as you're getting to different states, are there regulations around the bidding?
Yeah, so each state has their own kind of auction laws. Some of them allow you, if you have a license in one state, to use it in another state. Like I think Pennsylvania and Ohio are like that. But yeah, there are different auction laws that govern things that you need to auction license. And it used to not be that way for online auctions. It was usually just live auctions. So think like cattle auctions, auto auctions, stuff like that. But recently it seems like the states are changing that a little bit. And so they're starting to include online auctions. We learned that the hard way a little bit in Ohio. For a very brief time, they had changed the law and we weren't aware of it. And we got a letter saying, hey, you guys need an auction license. So it wasn't a huge deal. We got it figured out, but we were kind of caught by surprise.
Could have been.
Yeah.
Could have been. Absolutely could have been, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
That's cool. How about as we wrap up here?
Yeah.
We could go so many different directions too, because I see the marketing that you're doing. I see the TV commercials. You just do so many wonderful things. That could be a whole nother Boss Juice episode. Yeah. I'm not kidding. There's a lot into it, but as we wrap up, you always ask a couple questions that I think are super helpful for people. Yeah.
So the last question I always ask every person we interview that comes on the show is this question. And it's, if you can give one word of advice to an entrepreneur who wants to start a business, what would that be?
Just start. Do it. Right. I think like we were talking about this a little bit earlier. You know, there's the failure to launch because everybody's waiting for the right time, and they start to come up with excuses as to why, you know, it's not the right timing, or, you know, the economy's down, or I don't have the cash, or, you know, whatever the case may be. Figure out a plan, figure out a way to do it, and just do it. Because if you don't, you have to start. Like there has to be some increment, and so there has to be some incremental step that you take, right? And to go along with that, the other thing that I'll say is, don't look so far ahead that things become daunting, because what happens is people start like they're like 10 years ahead, you know, and they don't know what, like, it's in what happens is it's so chaotic that it's nerve wracking and it stresses you out. You're like, well, what happens if this happens, or what happens if that happens? Like, look, that's so far ahead, you don't even have to worry about it. What's in front of you right now? You know what I mean? And deal with that, right? That means set a goal, a short-term goal, and just start. And again, you know, you'll look back, like there's times where I look back and I'm like, how the hell did we even get here? Because you don't really know, because you just come in every day and you do what needs to be done. You set a goal that you want to get to, and then you do those incremental steps. And then, you know, you look at it and go, holy shit, we came a long way. Mm-hmm. I compare it to lifting weights, right? Look, if your goal is to bench 500 pounds, you're not going to go in the gym the first day and put 500 pounds on the bar and be like, I can't do it, right? What are you going to do? You're going to start with the bar, or whatever you can do, and then incrementally build on that. And that's going to take time, right? I mean, like, it's not going to happen overnight, but if you don't start, there's no chance that you'll get there. None. And so that's where I think, like, that's where people get, they set such a far off goal that they lose track of things, and they're not, like, it's not even within their realm of control. Like, do something that's within your realm of control, and then work on that, build on that. You know, and that's what will get you to that point.
I love that too, because I mean, it just helps me to believe now that we can both bench 500 pounds. I mean,
absolutely,
it's incredible.
Pick stuff up, put stuff down. Pick it up.
You don't know.
Down.
You don't know.
So this was good.
That's great advice.
Any other word of wisdom you want to share with these wonderful people that follow Boss Juice?
A little plug for MacBid.
Yeah.
Anything?
Yeah, get on the site and bid. No, it's obviously been great, and you know. I'm like I said before, I'm very fortunate, you know, and appreciative of everything. So yeah, check out the site, go bid, find a local location, all that good stuff.
I have to head downstairs. I got a few things to pick up.
Nice.
Well, listen, thanks again for joining us on the Boss Juice podcast. I got a feeling that this one in particular we're going to reach a lot of people. There are a lot of people that I think are curious about these local businesses, and probably kids that you went to school with, and people that you went to school with, and things like that probably want to know what you're doing, what you're up to. This is a great way to share that story.
Yeah.
So congratulations on everything.
Thanks.
Don't have a crystal ball, but I got a feeling there's a lot of good things that are going to come out of this.
Yeah, that would be great, and I feel the same way. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Kellen.
Thank you.
Thanks.